So then, we're going to look at using Affinity Photo to stack together several long exposure images to achieve a big stopper effect. So effectively what we're doing is I've taken several images here on a tripod with a variable neutral density filter, and they're all exposures of 10 seconds long. I wanted to achieve a longer exposure, say 30 seconds or 60 seconds, in order to really make the sky look silky smooth. But unfortunately, there are a couple of practical obstacles that get in the way of this. The first issue is that even with a very strong neutral density filter, it still might not be strong enough to avoid overexposing the image. Now, in conjunction with a neutral density filter, you also often end up stopping the lens down to a smaller aperture, as I've done here, as you can see from the slight starburst effect of the sun in the background. But you don't want to end up stopping down too much, because then you can introduce diffraction, which softens the image. So again, you can't use very small apertures because they'll compromise the image clarity, and so in that regard, you can't use slower shutter speeds. Now, the other issue with long exposures is camera shake. Now, when I took these series of images, it was an incredibly windy day, and frankly, these were all 10-second exposures. I couldn't get away with 30-second or 60-second exposures. It was just too long, and the risk of camera shake was just too great. I did try a couple of 20 to 30-second exposures, but in pretty much all of them, there was a tiny amount of camera shake. So to try and get around this, what we can do instead is take several shorter long exposure images, and then we stack them and average out the content in them, or blend them together. So let's go ahead and jump into Photo to do this. So I can go to File and New Stack. Then I'll go to Add, and I'll add my images here in the Big Stopper folder. So all we do then, we're choosing to automatically align them, that's fine. We'll just click OK. Okay, and if we move across to the Layers panel, we'll see it's grouped them into a live stack group. Now, this result here isn't particularly appealing, I have to admit. And we can experiment with the different stacking operators. So, for example, a mean operator will give a result much closer to what we're trying to achieve, which is a very smooth, milky looking sky. But it's still not perfect. So instead then, rather than keep these images in a live stack group, we're going to ungroup them. So to ungroup these, we can make sure we've got the live stack group selected. Then we can go to Arrange and Ungroup. Okay, so then we get all the layers as separate images, and what we can now do, as we've got them all selected, is go in and change the blend mode. So some of the blend modes, like for example Lighten, will achieve pretty much the same effect as some of the stacking operators. But if we work our way down to Average here, it allows us to achieve a smoother result compared to the Mean operator. Okay, so having achieved that Big Stopper sky effect, I now want to go in and just sort out a couple of potential issues. Because I was using quite a small aperture, there are some dust spots over here that I've spotted. Now, to really bring those out so you can try and tackle them, one good tip is to add a levels adjustment at the top of the layer stack. And we can tweak the black level and white level until we start to expose, here we go, the dust spots. Then I like to work non-destructively. So one great way of getting rid of these dust spots is to add a new pixel layer just above all of the image layers here. Then I'll go ahead and select the In-Painting Brush tool. And from the context toolbar here, we can set from current layer to current layer and below. So it will sample from the layers beneath it. So all I do is just in-paint over the offending area to remove the dust spot. So I'm just going to quickly pan around the image, holding the spacebar to achieve this, just to double check that there aren't any more to tackle. No, that's fine. Okay, so then I can just turn the levels adjustment off and get back to my image as I want it. So finally then, I'll just add a bit of oomph to this image, and to do that I'll just use a simple curves adjustment. Again, making sure it's on top of the pixel layer so we don't exclude that in-painting work we've done, and I'll just create a nice punchy tonal look to the image. Like so. And because why not, I'll just add a bit of saturation as well using an HSL adjustment. Like so. Okay, so just a final thing to mention then is that you can select a number of these layers and hide them in order to see. I'll just hide that pixel layer as well so we can't see the in-painted result. We can sort of start to peel back the layers, as it were, and see how we're building up our big stopper effect. And again, at the end of all this, you might decide, after all, that you prefer just one long exposure on its own, in which case that's absolutely fine. You might argue that you get more of this lovely orange cloud detail here that you prefer to see instead. But that's the beauty of it, it's all non-destructive. So if you change your mind at a later date and go, oh no, actually I prefer smoother looking clouds, you can just bring those layers back in like so, and there we go. So that was a bit of a rambly tutorial, but I hope that's given you some ideas for your long exposure photography using stacking. If you have any questions or queries, please do ask on the Affinity forums, and don't forget to check out the other video tutorials. Thank you for watching.